My name is Andy Savory. I was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, St. Paul's Hospital. I have a brother and a sister, both younger, and we were raised in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. My parents are now deceased, but for their retirement years they lived on Hornby Island, one of the small islands in the Sunshine Coast here. My childhood was very varied. We had a lot of influences in our lives. My father was quite strongly Anglican, my mother not so strong. I would say our family upbringing was quite spiritual, but not necessarily strongly religious. We went to Christmas prayer probably every year, and often to the midnight mass, which was a lot of fun because we got to stay up really late. Other than that, we sort of followed the texts of the Bible, followed the teachings in the Bible, but not regularly attending at any given church or anything like that. So, my relationship as a Christian with the Bible was not a strong connection. I learned early on, I'm not sure how or who, that the Bible was more of a collection of different authors rather than one thing coming directly from God. It was had many interpretations, you say, and parts of it were missing, and parts of it were in storage and not being used. So I didn't have a really strong connection with the Bible. Our community, the people I hung out with, would call themselves Christian, but they were very much similar to our family, not regularly attending, but, following the precepts, the general precepts of Christianity, of good behavior, as it was, working towards a good civilization. Before I converted, I didn't really have much knowledge at all about Islam. I knew it was one of the major religions, but had very, very few facts to go on, which was one of the things that made it kind of interesting to explore when I first started to learn about it. Well, when I left Nanaimo and came over to the mainland of British Columbia and worked on my own here for several years, and sort of had a slight disconnect from my family and a real disconnect from my old community. So I was, in a sense, searching for something, I'm not sure what. But I eventually got into contact with some Muslim people and ended up asking them a variety of questions, which led eventually to me taking a course in Islam from the Sunni brothers. And that was very interesting. It was a 10 or 12 week course. And that eventually led to some more intimate sessions with Sheikh Qasim Ali, our sheikh who was here at the Sexsmith site before we had this facility here. And eventually I did my Shahada with him back in the year 2000. I met some people who were good role models, I suppose, of Islam. They're very gentle people and very outgoing, and just by asking some questions through them, that was sort of what got me going on an investigation of Islam, I guess you might say. Yeah. No, I would say that the Holy Quran inspired me in that it was a complete work, sort of. It was unbroken up, like the Bible is broken up into all sorts of different authors and sections and things. So I think the thing about the Quran is its completeness and its sort of obvious, I don't know how to say, flow or continuity was what appealed to me. I came across it through the teachings of the Sunni brothers, and they introduced me to the Quran, and throughout the course that I took, they had many examples from the Quran, and slowly we started to read through it. Yeah, one of the things that got me intrigued with Islam was associating with the family that I mentioned there. When I started to work at Science World in Vancouver here, I met my now wife's mother, who was working in the gift shop then, and later on her daughter came to work at Science World as well, and the two of us were hired on to work as a part of a 4-person team that toured British Columbia, giving off science shows to small communities all over the province. And during that time, we're talking about everything over the different meals and staying awake on the long drives between communities and all that sort of thing. So Islam was a topic of conversation, and it got me more and more interested in it. So eventually, I started to sort of investigate it on my own. It continued to be interesting, so it was good. In British Columbia at that time, there really wasn't any image of Islam in the media. It wasn't a high point or a low point, or it wasn't part of the sports scene or anything like that. So there's very little media coverage that I recognized as Islamic media coverage back then. Mind you, I didn't pay too much attention to the media. I'm not a television aficionado, so I spent a lot of time in the woods when I was young, and didn't spend much time worrying about the outside world too much. It's more the biological world and the miracles, the interwoven intricacies in the biological world fascinated me. And that's part of my spirituality too. I believe there's a God because of the complexity of our world and the beauty of our world. There's so many things interwoven and interconnected that you cannot even imagine that it could possibly be coincidence. It has to be guided. And so that's where my spirituality sort of comes from. Now, as I said, the media image just wasn't there. There was nobody investigating Islam. There was no reason to. I mean, this is 15, 16, 17 years ago in British Columbia, certainly. And we're not part of America, and we don't really follow the American television patterns too much, I don't think, but, or at least we didn't used to. We do more now, I think. But there was very little information out there. I had to search to find a course on Islam that was open to the public without going to university or something, right? So the Sunni brothers were the only people that had any information out there. And I'm glad that they did. They were very welcoming and very happy to have me there, and it was quite interesting. My early days in Nanaimo, my family is probably, even amongst Nanaimoites, is probably a fairly open family. We didn't have the concept of racism or thing. We had a lot of different people, and now that I'm older, I can see that my father and mother conspired to bring different people to our kitchen table to have dinner with us. And we had biologists and politicians and all sorts of different people come through the house. My father was a probation officer, and he worked with all different types of people in the community, from the rich to the poor. We had a lot of friends within the First Nations group. Our school ground was very white, not mixed, so there was not any problems that way at all. But I never considered anybody different on the basis of where they came from or what their background was. I was just always interested in meeting up with them and talking to them and finding out their stories. And Nanaimo is a kind of a small community, and it had that flavor for many years, even after I left, but it's getting a bit bigger now. But it was a small Anglo, predominantly white community with a background of First Nations people in it. And the First Nations people were just beginning to come back and reestablish things like their language and their cultural centers, and starting to rebuild from the bad times, I guess, they had gone through with the advent of the white settlers coming into their territory. You have to think of British Columbia as very, very young. I mean, we're only about 150 years old as an incorporated entity as British Columbia. So all of our civilization that we so proudly vaunt is only about 200 years here. And the first 125 years was pretty much based on ignorance, I have to say, I think. And a lot of damage was done to the First Nations peoples here. That is slowly changing, I'm very glad to say. But yeah, it It was a small community. People cared about each other. We did a lot of community work. I can remember my mother and father coming home one night covered in soot, charcoal, because they'd been repairing the Scout House, one of the community centers that had accidentally caught fire. And they'd been inside all night scrubbing the walls, and they came home looking like chimney sweeps. But no, we had a lot of community involvement as youth, as a kids, and again, I think that was very purposeful on the part of my parents to get us involved in the community and to make us understand that volunteerism was part of what life was about. I've had a very, very gentle transition into Islam compared to some of the stories I've heard where people's families have disowned them and things like that. My family, I think they blinked once, and that was about it. They were totally welcoming any path that I chose to take. They left it up to me, and what I did was fine by them, sort of thing. They were curious, but welcoming to any new conversation, any new point of discussion. So I didn't have any problems with my parents. On the actual day I took the Shahadat, I think it was November 14th in 2000, with Sheikh Kasmali, who has, I'm glad to say, become a friend of mine. Although we don't see each other as much as we should. He was very, very kind with me and very understanding and guiding me very carefully and gently along the way, letting me ask any question that I wanted to ask. My friends, again, curiosity, nothing other than curiosity. There was no negative vibe at all that I ever experienced in anybody. So, like I say, I've had a very gentle transition, so it's been very good. The welcoming from the community here was tremendous. Everybody soon knew my name, probably because I was the only white person there, and the only person named Andy, so it wasn't very hard for them to remember my name. My concern was that there was so many Muhammads and Alis that I was never sure of anybody's name for the longest time. But yeah, the earliest memories I have are open welcome. My friends Karar and Mehboob and Mamdou and other people gave me such a warm welcome that it really made a difference. It was very very easy to be here with them and be part of the community. You mean not being able to eat ham? No. The difficulties with, there weren't any real difficulties. I never drank anyway, so there was no alcohol. I never did smoke, so there was no cigarettes to worry about. There was, not eating ham and the dietary restrictions have never been a problem. My wife and my mother-in-law are both fantastic cooks, so I get really well fed. The biggest problem is staying slim. But no, I don't think so. It never impacted that way to me. It's just more cerebral. The peace I find with being a Muslim is a very wonderful strength. My first year as a Muslim was a very interesting year. I took my Shahadat. I graduated with my bachelor's from University of British Columbia with my teaching degree. I got married. My wife and I moved into our first apartment together. And I was regularly attending at the mosque. Had a great, as I say, a great welcome there, but very soon felt like I was contributing. There's things that I could do there that I just got involved in the volunteer program quite quickly. One of the first memories I have is going outside to the big trash container there and jumping on the garbage bag so we could get more into it. So all sorts of little jobs I could help out with, and I was very glad to and very welcomed in there. I got my first job the same time, so I became a full-time teacher, and that kept me busy. And yeah, it was really an interesting mix of a year, so it's good. Well, I think for many small points, culture often takes over. But for the bigger points, the main teachings of the Quran, the Prophet, peace be upon him, and peace be upon them, is those teachings are very strongly presented through the imams. We've had a system here where we have many visiting speakers come through here, and the message is consistent and strong. The things that are cultural generally revolve around food and conversation and people getting together and things like that, and it doesn't interfere or contradict the message of Islam in any way that I've ever felt significant at all. The stories of the family of the Prophet, peace be upon them, came to me kind of slowly, I guess, after the introduction through Sheikh Kasmali and the Sunni brothers. And I think that there's a real difference in coming to it from the outside, rather being born to it. I think a lot of the people here have thoughts of the Ahl-Bayt as close as an aunt or an uncle, part of their family, truly part of their family. And I think I have yet to achieve that closeness. Some of the stories strike a real resonance with me, like Abbas at Karbala. Very, very strong, very affecting. His, you know, being a working man, I can sort of relate to Abbas a little bit. I don't have the strength of a very strong man, but I really enjoy the play and feel of my muscles when I'm working. That action that Abbas was renowned for on the battlefield. And then the day on Karbala, he sort of renounces that and goes out to fetch water, a mundane task, not a warrior's task. And that's how he meets his fate, you know, that's how he dies doing this. He sort of surrenders to Allah all his muscles. He puts them aside and he just goes to get water. It struck me very strongly. The other thing about Karbala is the Imam Hussein, peace be upon him, knew from near birth, I suppose, as soon as he could speak intelligently to his grandfather, peace be upon him, he knew that what he was fated for, and he never deviated from that. Just throughout his life, moving towards Karbala, and not, you know, taking any other road. I mean, there must have been times in his life when he could have easily avoided Karbala, but he never did that. He took, and you know, just that thought throughout your life that you are going to be shahad at Karbala, and continuing along, doing the things he did and providing the teachings and the structure for the community that he did, a tremendous faith and a tremendous strength. Just, yeah, any one of the people at Karbala you can take and make an example of, but you know, there's some people like Imam who lived with it all his life, you know, so that's very, very impressive, you know, very affecting, very heroic. I don't know how you put it in terms of English words are so futile so many times. Damascus struck me quite strongly. When I was on Hajj, one of the things that struck me was the country there. You know, I've spent a lot of my time outdoors and in our lush British Columbia, and to see the barrenness of the land, the sun-baked rocks on which not even lichen grew. You know, I went and I looked to try and find some life on some of those places, and it just's not there. It's a forbidding environment for anything to grow in, yet alone bring forth this faith and you know, all, you know, flower out from there to the rest of the world. It must have been really a hardship to live an average day back then, just to find water and to find food and carry on with your ordinary activities. Must have been a lot harder than what we experience now. And so I constantly had thoughts reverting back to the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Lady Zainab, yeah, in Damascus. But on the actual Hajj journey, the walking and the trekking, it's just the land. But in Damascus, the thing that really affected me was I guess the continuity of the worshippers, the people that have come there since her passing, and the dedication of the artisans and the people to build the beauty into that place. It's really beautiful, and it's really, the work is really detailed. It's just, you can see people have given up long sections of their life to contribute the art, the tiles into that mosque. It's great. I don't know that you can go to that shrine without tears, So it's emotional, but being the son of a very British man, you don't want to show too many emotions, Yeah, you have to, you can't avoid sort of trying to put yourself in the place at the time and think about the cruelty that exists in the world. And, sort of, I guess you resolve in some degree to try and rectify that, or try and nullify it wherever you can go in the rest of your life. Ramadan was fairly easy when I joined in November, or became a Muslim in November, because the Ramadan period was very short. It didn't enter my consciousness that it would get longer and longer. This last Ramadan was my 15th, and it was very long. But very fortunately, I've never been one to needed food every 5 hours or anything like that. So going without food is not a real hardship. It's going without the drink and still without the water and carrying on throughout the day that is a little bit hard. I really like the concept of going through your day as if you haven't the ability to get food or water. It's not so much denying yourself, it's putting yourself in the place of somebody who doesn't have easy access to food or water throughout the day. And it certainly makes me think, anyway, of on this planet, how we can change that. Karbala is, I suppose, full of many lessons, but I think just self-sacrifice, putting yourself second or third in your life. And it's so easy for us to try and put ourselves first and be a little bit selfish. And I've been really, astounded at the selflessness of the people at the mosque here, the people I've met through Islam and through the connections here. It's simple things, but my mother-in-law asks me 5 or 6 times if I've had enough food, right? Whereas in my Christian background, it would be once. And if you didn't reach for it, it went somewhere else. So she never ever puts herself first, right? She's always working for somebody else or for the family or something. And, so is my wife and my father-in-law. They're always very unselfish, and it's really refreshing or very good to see, because I think in outside of the society, in the the more cosmopolitan society, people really do tend to put themselves first much more frequently, as people that don't have the guidance or the subtle teachings around them to keep them thinking that there is other things that come first. You know, so it's really good that way. As far as putting the information about Islam out into the community, I think in general we're starting to do a good job. I think we have to do more. I think we have to stop thinking of ourselves as the only pathway to Allah. I think we need to start thinking that we are one of the pathways to Allah, and making that pathway available to the general public in many, many ways. For instance, in the educational system, we're not supposed to teach about religion in the classroom. We're not supposed to speak about our faith in the classroom. Being a teacher, I find that unsettling. I think that our society needs faith, it needs direction, and all of the major religions that I know about, their goal is to create a peaceful society where everybody has equal opportunities and has the ability to worship or not worship as they please. I've been asked many times about what we should do to get our message out there, and I can't think of any particular things. One of the things that youth group has been doing here is the Journey into Islam, which is a night where we can invite community members in for a nice dinner and a display of different Islamic artifacts and teachings and things like that. Just an informative night. I think we have to be very careful not to try and convert people, but just to inform them and lay that out there. I think we should all sort of start writing letters to the editors about all sorts of different little things that go along with a peaceful existence, peaceful coexistence. There is much curiosity out there. I hear the term Islamophobia a lot, and I don't meet up with Islamophobia. I meet up with curiosity about Islam and lack of knowledge. It's not a fear other than the fear of the unknown. And I think if you had Islamophobia, a fear of it, I think in many cases that's incorrect. I think it's just ignorance. There's an awful lot of things to learn out in the world these days, and there's not any more time than there used to be to learn it in. So people's educations work around what they're interested in. I think if we can interest people in finding out about Islam, that'd be one of the keys. Give them something to find out more, a reason to find out more, rather than just general education, something that strikes a chord within them and that they will then be more interested in following it up. So the more we put out there, the more often we're seen as Muslims in the community, doing good deeds, working as honest people, working for a good amount of labor for a decent dollar, and there's a lot of people out there that don't seem to do that anymore, don't seem to be honest, don't seem to give value for their dollar of effort, sort of thing. So I think we should be seen as doing that all the time. And, back to the Prophet, peace be upon him, that's one of the reasons he was so well considered, respected in his community. It was just because of his honest dealings in the community prior to his revelations. If anybody is interested in Islam, I think one of the best things for them to do is come and meet the people. Come to the mosque. The mosques are open, very, very few closed mosques. And you can just sit down and talk to anybody there, at least in my experience. Everybody's willing to give you a smile and a handshake, and generally food and tea as well. So come down, sit on the sidelines. Most of the mosques have a place where you can observe what goes on during the prayer times, and then certainly during the lectures you can listen in and see what goes on in the general night. You can probably get hold of a free Quran if you're interested in it. Somebody will find you one. So I think meeting the people is the important thing if you're at all interested in it. And then each community has several people in it who are very well versed in the teachings of the Ahl-Bayt and the Prophet, peace be upon them, so that they can take the Quran and make you understand it at a much deeper level than the words the first reading might allow you to see. So yeah, come and meet the people. If you're already a Muslim and you're watching this program, I think that it might be a good idea to be very open about the other faiths. There's a lot of carryover, at least between Christianity and Islam. And I think a lot of our Christian friends would be interested to learn how high respect Jesus is held within Islam. There's not a lot of information being circulated at the Christian church about Islam. They like to keep their converts as well as they can. So I think you should be open. I think you should be prepared to greet people and, like I said earlier, give them a smile and a handshake and a cup of tea and answer any questions that they might have. I certainly received a great welcome when I came here. It was a big part of my continuing as a Muslim into sort of, I don't know what you'd call it, full-time Islam. But no, I think openness, clarity with your conversations, clarity with your thoughts and the way you present things, being sure of your concepts, making sure what you're saying is Islamic and not caught up in the rhetoric of the press. It's not that easy sometimes. A lot of questions are very specific and are embedded in the minds of the other people already in the stuff that they see on the media. If that's the case, then make sure you're referring the person to your Maulana or your wise man, so you get the right message to these people. I don't think you'll make converts, and I don't think that's what you want to make. I think you just want to get people comfortable with Islam, comfortable enough to ask questions, comfortable enough for a basic understanding of where we're coming from and what we're trying to do. And all we're trying to do is create a peaceful society.